Hello, hello, hello. Ah, good. Mic is working. Now let's just make sure the video capture is working. Yep. Here we go. That's what I was looking for. Okay, so yeah, here we are. Stream is finally on. Don't know how long it's going to take for you guys to get on here, but once again, sorry I'm late. It seems like every time I do a live stream, it ends up being late. And no, this time I was ready. I was ready, rearing to go. I was here at 4 p.m., got things started, and then things choked up. So I had to reset the computer, change up the settings, turned out that my antivirus needed upgrading. Did that, went back into my settings, tried to start that up. And OBS had to have its settings rechanged. And needless to say, a lot of fiddling around in the back to finally get this going. And it's my own freaking fault. I should have remembered, to get that. Every time I do a live stream and I'm using OBS, I normally have OBS set up for game live streaming and for Twitch. So I had to reset everything, like change things around and set things up to go with a live stream here on YouTube like I used to. So just had to get all that set up. But at least the mic is working. Hopefully you guys can hear me pretty well, because I'm constantly having to fiddle with this thing. Got everything going. So, got my notes on the screen. I thought I would have it written out, but screw it. I just kept it on Notepad on the screen. So we're ready to go. Before I get started with this, let me just say that even though I am planning on having this QA structured, like I'm going to present the topic first, and then you guys can slam me with questions afterwards, we don't necessarily need to keep the QA strictly to what I talked about. Like, first I'm going to, I'm just going to throw my stuff, blah, 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 blah. Then we can discuss the stuff. And then afterwards, anything you want to hit me with, you can hit me with, and then it'll be over. I'm planning on having this for be maybe an hour and a half, depending on how things go. I'm not going to be talking for too long, hopefully, and then we can just kind of go on from there. But this is a bit of an experiment for my QA, bringing up a topic first, and then we talk about it for a little bit, because I don't want all my QAs to end up kind of being the same. This month's QA, next month's QA, hit me with questions, and everybody just keeps asking the same questions. I keep coming with the same answers. After a while, you guys are going to consider that boring. At least I would think. So, basically, just this is just going to be an experiment to see how well it goes. If it goes well, this is the way I'm going to keep doing it. If it doesn't go well, or if you guys hate it, I'll come up with something else. Or if you guys just want straight up just do regular QAs and just throw questions, and I can do that too. And I'm not necessarily going to completely get rid of just plain old QAs. I'm going to throw those in sporadically every now and then. It's just that I don't want to keep doing that over and over and then bore the hell out of you guys. That's why I decided to try to come up with a topic first. Kind of make it like my type of videos that I normally put out, but then you get to hit me with questions right afterwards. I had sent, by the way, for anybody on Patreon, I had sent the message out that this is on. Anybody from the $10 and up level, just let me know if you want in. I know in Google Hangouts you can give them the URL so they can just go right in on the call. Unfortunately, I am not seeing that in here, and that's bothering me, because I wanted, if you guys were interested, I wanted you guys at that level to be able to be in on the video chat like I used to do when I set this up via Google Hangouts, but this is not making it easy. The controls I have on here, I'm not seeing that option, so I'm kind of worried. But we'll see. Oh, somebody in the chat was asking, do you already have questions you're supposed to ask in chat? So, there were a couple of people who already had questions. They had posted it up, and I will get to those. But if you have any questions, you can ask in the chat, or you can use the super chat that I have set up. So, either one of those will work. And again, we can save those questions for at the end of what I am about to, we're saving the questions for the end of what I got to say. So, without further ado, and already I got 11 people watching. Wow. Okay. Let's just get on with this and act like this is a regular video. Well, not completely, because if I acted like this was a regular video, I might have to do 2 or 3 takes, and we're doing this live, so screw it. I wanted this to be on barehanded martial arts in Chinese martial arts, or particularly the history of it. And the reason why I wanted to talk about it is because I was recently listening instead of reading, because I have audiobooks as well as my regular ones. I was I was recently listening to a book called The Shaolin Monastery, History, Religion, and Chinese Martial Arts. I'd actually been sent this book years ago. One of my viewers had actually sent me a copy of this book a while back. I wish I could remember that guy's name because I want to thank him profusely for it. It's a really good book. If you're interested in, like, you know, the real history of Chinese martial arts, you know, especially Shaolin Chinese martial arts, how it developed, what it really introduced in the whole scheme of things, what the monastery was known for, how it kind of got away with being a Buddhist temple and a military training place at the same time. But it really gets into that. But it also goes into a lot of the background history of Chinese martial arts development. And one interesting thing about it is that they talked a little bit about, you know, barehanded fighting. And I was listening to the book this time. Like, first I read it years ago and thought it was great information. And because of my long commute, I tend to listen to audiobooks, you know, to and from work. And I decided, what the hell? They got an audio version of this. Let's listen to that again. And it got to the chapter on barehanded fighting. And it got into something that I've sort of hinted at, but never really gone into detail on. And it's that Chinese martial arts originally used to focus primarily on weapons. You can sort of see this these days. You can kind of see remnants of this even in our modern training. Even though these days we focus primarily on barehanded fighting, for obvious reasons, I would think are obvious reasons, in the past it was primarily focused on weapons. Remember that Shaolin, for instance, was known for its staff fighting. The barehanded stuff came afterwards. It was from the Ming Dynasty onward that you started seeing more of a focus on barehanded fighting in Chinese martial arts. Same thing with Shaolin. But before that, and even during the Ming and Qing dynasties, a lot of the focus was on weapons. Which makes sense. After all, martial arts are the arts of war, the skills of combat. And if you're training in combat, you're going to be using the weapons of the day. Just like these days, if you're in the military, your primary focus is going to be on the weapons. You do get barehanded training, yes. But that's, you know, to build upon, you know, the weapon skills that you're going to be developing on later. You know, your gun warfare, or if you're in close combat and your gun's run out, then you pull out your combat knife or whatever. But yeah, the focus is on weapons. That's always going to be, you know, a constant with military training. It wasn't any different in the past. But for some strange reason, once you get into Ming Dynasty China, you start seeing a focus, at least on the civilian side of things, on barehanded fighting. Now, I think this is for, well, actually, they go into the reasons why. During the Ming era, there seemed to have been a focus on personal development. There was always this kind of like thing about personal development throughout China, you know, ways of cultivating the self, whether through philosophy, religious ritual, and even in certain physical calisthenics. You see, especially in Taoist circles and then later on in Buddhist circles, when they took certain philosophies and key practices from the Taoist side of things, you know, a way of trying to cultivate one's mind and one's body through spiritual practices. And with the back and forth going on with various different cultures, you know, interacting with Persia, interacting with India, obviously with India, otherwise you wouldn't have Buddhism there. You start seeing people incorporating these yogic, you know, practices in their health practices. Notice I'm talking about health practices. There was a bit of a distinction, at least in the past, between martial arts and cultivating yourself through breathing exercises and certain physical movements and so on. But as you tend to see with this culture, they started combining everything because they saw that there was a similarity between how you can move through combat and how you can, you know, develop yourself with health exercises. And by the time we reached the Ming Dynasty, everything pretty much had combined. And you were starting to see certain treatises being written on how to cultivate yourself and gain, just gain strength and mental, spiritual clarity and all that type of stuff through physical exercise. It was a way of, transforming your mind and body. In fact, you held the Bone Marrow Classic, which a lot of people claim was the original Shaolin manuscript, It wasn't. Um, but if you know, it's called the Bone and Marrow Transformation Classic. In other words, you're supposedly transforming your body into something better, into something stronger. It's through this physical practice that you somehow are able to harmonize your internal energies or whatever into, you know, being a more powerful person. And it's mostly through the barehanded training that you start seeing this. It wasn't through the weapons training. I mean, there was a clear, you know, delineation. Like, weapons training is for combat, period. You're not going to really separate that. For, you know, thousands of years in China, you were learning martial arts, you know, you're using your sword, your staff, your spear, whatever. You're learning combat, period. That's what it's for. The barehanded stuff that you start seeing later, you know, or at least the push for it later, because barehanded has always been around, but, you know, now is more of an emphasis on, oh, I'm training barehand so that I can not only learn how to defend myself, but I'm also cultivating myself. I'm strengthening myself. I'm improving my health. You start seeing more and more of this emphasis in the Ming Dynasty. And we pretty much are we are stuck in that mode today. Though there seems to be a bit of a backlash these days, even within the Chinese martial arts community itself. I'm sure anybody who's either practiced Chinese martial arts or have at least, you know, encountered it or studied it a little bit has heard the whole, oh, Chinese martial arts is for improving your health, or Chinese martial arts is about cultivating your mind. I'm sure you guys have heard this. There's that stronger emphasis. In fact, you've even seen it in certain movies like Fists of Legend, where one of the characters says, if you're trying to defeat your enemy, use a gun. Martial arts is for personal enlightenment. That wasn't the case in the past. In the past, you were learning martial arts to beat somebody down. Either to defend yourself or to win wars, period. It had nothing to do with personal enlightenment. That thought, that emphasis on personal enlightenment started showing up more prominently. I'm not saying it wasn't always there, but you start seeing more of it more prominently from the Ming Dynasty onward. It started becoming this new thing phasing in, and it focused on the barehanded stuff. Now, I said before that Chinese martial arts focused primarily on weapons in the beginning. There was barehanded training, yes, but the main thing was to get to weapons. And as I said before, you can see traces of that now. If you notice, certain styles are known for signature weapons. Tai Chi Chuan, for instance, which is a fairly recent-ish martial art. Bagua Zhang is more recent. What is it known for? The straight sword. Xing Yi Chuan, what is it known for? The spear. Cha Chuan or Pigua Zhang, those styles are known for their Dao fighting. In fact, a lot of Chinese martial arts styles are known for Dao fighting, which makes sense since the Dao was the main sidearm from like after the Han Dynasty period onward. Remember, the Jian was no longer regulated as a battlefield weapon after the Han Dynasty. It became more of a, you know, it became more of a symbolic weapon or civilian's defense weapon or something just to wear on you to still, you know, denote status. There were some Jian that were created that weren't even intended for fighting. They were just way too ornate. The Dao became more of, you know, the main weapon to use. No, not the oxtail Dao. That's more of a recent creation. I think that was created around the 1800s. Something like that. I gotta recheck my notes again. Sorry. I'm kind of going off topic. The main thing is it used to focus on weapons, and you can still see that right now. Except it's funny, these days we focus primarily on barehand. And there are a lot of people who practice Chinese martial arts who don't even know how to use weapons anymore. Either because this class just doesn't teach them, or because they just didn't get to the higher levels. Because if you notice, they now regulate, you gotta like be a high level student, or at least an intermediary student, before you can even touch the weapons. And there is some precedence with this. Like, the famous Ming general Qi Jiguan, and I'm probably butchering the name, he taught his troops that way. Though his reasoning for it wasn't necessarily because he felt that, oh, you have to learn barehand. It was more like teaching people barehanded fighting will get them used to combat. It'll build up their ability to spar. It will take away the fear they have on combating someone. And, you know, then once they get used to, okay, I'm going up against someone, they put the weapons in their hands. And he did it a little bit faster. His focus was on weapons, but he does have, his famous manual does have a section on barehanded fighting, which, by the way, there is some evidence that that's the beginnings of Tai Chi Chuan. The movements that you see in Tai Chi Chuan it's theorized that a particular dude who had trained with Ji-Ji-Wan, who came from Chen Village, came back with those basic techniques, expanded upon them, and then you get Chen-style Tai Chi Chuan, but that's a subject for a whole different video. Ming Dynasty comes around, and you got tons of civilians training in martial arts, and China tended to restrict weapons. Like, different periods of time tended to restrict what type of weapons civilians could run around with. Legally, anyway. Of course, people illegally grab weapons all the time, just like now. But with this emphasis on self-cultivation, came this interesting marrying of personal cultivation, whether it's religious or pure health, spiritual, whatever, and barehanded practice, where you didn't have the weapon in your hand and you're putting yourself through these forms and these interesting body contortions or whatever that are supposed to be enhancing your body and mind. If I can go into my notes for a little bit, you had some people who straight up talked about this in these old manuals. Hold on for a second, I'm scrolling through my notepad thing here, and I'm trying to find this dude's name. Okay, you have an interesting book called a Hand Combat Classic and Zhuangji's Acupuncture Point. And it was an introduction written to this by a guy named Cao Huangdou. And he had written this introduction back in 1784. And interestingly enough, he basically talks at first about how training barehanded is a good way of protecting yourself. Of course, he's going with the whole thing of it originated in Shaolin, which it didn't, but I'll get into that. But interestingly enough, even though he admits in the intro that hand combat is a way to defend yourself, he also talks more about how if you're going to be studying hand combat, you shouldn't be overly excessive. Nowadays, people would say external. Like, to use his terms, he was saying that, right in here, he's saying that there were people who were just overexerting themselves with their skills. Like, the way they were fighting was too inelegant. He said, for the most part, to quote him, goes, for the most part, they strain their muscles and expose their bones, waste their energy, or chi, and use force. Now, this is something that's interesting. This is, you know, something that I'm pretty sure you hear a lot of internal stylists talk about, except these days they put it in terms of internal and external. You know, these guys are using overly muscular force while we use internal power. Never mind the fact that they still need to employ proper body structure in order to deploy these techniques anyway, and you can see those same body structures in all Chinese martial arts. But I've already made a video on that. I don't need to beat a dead horse here. It's still interesting to me that you're seeing the beginnings of what would be considered an internal staple, namely using techniques that don't waste your energy and don't overexert yourself. The interesting that this guy does not point out particular styles that he thinks are doing this. He just simply says there are some fighters out there who overexert themselves. He said there's certain gifted practitioners who rise to prominence, but they're not, basically said they're not refined fighters. He then also talks about how fist fighting, he took up barehanded fighting to keep from being bullied, which I'm sure you guys have heard that before. And then later on, it helped to, better his thinking. He said, right here, it goes, when one's resolution is not distracted and when his spirit is concentrated, he'll begin to acquire the agility of mind conceiving, hands responding. And at this point, there's sure to be no straining of muscles nor exposure of bones. Now, interestingly enough, these days, people think of that same concept more in terms of, I'm using my chi. But the way this guy is describing it, look at it again. He says, when one's resolution is not distracted, when his spirit is concentrated, he'll be able to acquire the agility of mind conceiving, hands responding. In other words, this is more of a mental response, not some weird spiritual chi energy response thing. No, it's more like once you've reached that point where your mind and body are able to, like, you'll get to the point where your mind instantly thinks it and your body instantly reacts. And it does it effectively without overexerting yourself. Which, even though certain internal stylists try to act like that is, they have a monopoly on this, all effective martial arts do this. It doesn't matter whether you're a Chinese stylist, Japanese stylist, Western stylist, or within Chinese martial arts itself. It doesn't really matter your style. Everyone's trying to get to that point when your techniques are efficient, when you can do it without wasting your energy or wasting your breath. You're not wasting too much movement, and you're able to just, the minute an attack is coming at you, or the minute your mind is like, okay, I got to do this, your body's already reacting and doing it in the proper way. You're doing the exact technique at the right time and doing it with barely any effort. Even boxers are trying to get to that point. And by the way, I'm not saying that to belittle boxing. I'm just saying that any martial art. And boxing, for some strange reason, people tend to put down low anyway, even though it is pretty effective. This guy's still focusing primarily on getting yourself to be efficient in body and mind. There isn't really too much emphasis on developing some strange otherworldly power in order to do this. And it also is interesting to note that not this guy, but other people who started going on this line of thinking, when they started talking about the martial arts that they felt exemplified this the best, or the so-called internal arts, as they started using that term. And by the way, back in the past, when they meant internal, they didn't mean internal, at least when they were first coming up with this term. This is before the days of Sun Lutang, who I got to get into if I'm going to be talking about this. Back then, when they were talking about internal and external, they are actually talking about arts that came from within the country and arts that came from without the country. In other words, they were talking about the Chinese martial arts that were developed in-house. Because this was the beginning of the belief of Shaolin. The martial arts originated in Shaolin Temple, and they came from this Indian monk named Dao Mo, who, even though he was primarily concerned with Buddhism, and there's no record of him being a fighter, somehow developed Chinese martial arts. The Ming Dynasty is where you started seeing fictional writing, and I'm not making this up. You can look up this history for yourself. The Ming Dynasty, there was a proliferation of novels, martial arts novels, fantasy tales about martial artists and the supposed history of martial arts. And it's from there that you really start seeing the proliferation of the belief that of Shaolin Temple being this ultimate place where one can learn these martial arts that turn you into a superhuman. And these tales originate from stories within Shaolin itself, where monks believe that certain monks learned their abilities from otherworldly beings or from the gods themselves. There's a famous story of this one monk who wanted to gain strength because the other monks are stronger than him and he was too weak. And this one powerful war god actually came down and said, I will make you a stronger fighter, but you have to, give yourself over to me, and you have to eat meat, which is a sin in Buddhism. Well, certain tenets, it depends on your sect or whatever. But he's like, you need to eat meat. He's like, I can't eat meat, my vows. And the god gets mad at him and basically force feeds him the meat. And then the guy all of a sudden gets really strong and, gets big muscles and stuff, and he's able to swing around a giant metal staff and, show off his skills and all that. You got these tales within the temple itself of monks getting powerful strength from an otherworldly source. From there, you start seeing it branching out to it becoming Shaolin being this place where people can go and learn martial arts that give them amazing powers, and this is the origin of it. Never mind the fact that Chinese martial arts were already being practiced before Shaolin had even shown up. However, having said all that, the whole thing of body cultivation and, using martial arts to make yourself a more a better person in mind and body easily can marry into religious practices. And that's something that Shaolin monks excelled at. If it's one thing they were really good at, it was incorporating something from outside and then bringing it into the temple and making it their thing. Staff training being one of them. For all intents and purposes, the records show that they were known for that technique, especially by the time of the Ming Dynasty. They were supposed to be pretty good at it. Really, really good at it. But by the Ming Dynasty, there started being more of an emphasis on the barehanded fighting. Because with the barehanded fighting, you can also divorce yourself further from the concept of martial arts being primarily for combat. You got a weapon in your hand. I mean, I know these days, because we no longer use melee weapons for, wars and stuff, it's easier for us to divorce the idea of practicing with a sword being practicing primarily for war. It's a bit tricky to do, but it can be done. You got people practicing Tai Chi sword, who have no intention of learning to use it for sparring. You know? Or people practicing Aido or Aijitsu, and they're just going through the whole meditative practice of rising from Seiza and doing their motions and putting the sword back in. It becomes something of a meditative practice because, again, you don't need to use this stuff in real life. But to give you an idea of how much harder it must have been to divorce oneself of their weapons training with some kind of meditative process, imagine a military dude practicing with his guns purely as a Zen thing. I'm sure it's been done, but I'm also sure it's not a widespread practice. If you're training with guns, you know what you're training for. Okay? It's you. I mean, you and the guys who probably are turning it into a Zen practice. That's not. I bet you it's not the primary reason why they're doing it, unless they're much older in life. Nowadays, people want to pick up a pistol or they want to train with, you know, a rifle or whatever. They know what they're training for. Okay, it's concrete. This is for combat. Period. That's the way it was with these melee weapons back then. But if you're going barehand, it's one step removed from that. Especially if you're practicing on your own, or if all you're doing is just going through forms and everybody else is doing the same thing as you, you kind of get into that sort of almost meditative quality of going through your motions, especially if the motions have a certain aesthetic quality to it. If there's a certain aesthetic beauty to your movements, and if you have to really focus on getting those movements, you know, you got to get it done right, you got to measure your breathing, and if you're in a place where you're used to going in certain yogic stances anyway, you can incorporate that into your training. You can, like, as while you're going through your fist forms and kicks and you go into your stances, you can then go into another form that's a bit more meditative. You can, like, there's certain movements in certain Shaolin boxing. If you may notice certain, you know, Shaolin boxing movements where they do something that has you going, what? How do you use that in combat? Like when they suddenly go into like this weird reclining position, like on the ground. I mean, yeah, I guess if you're really good, you can use that to dodge a motion, but there's much more efficient ways to dodge, you know, a high attack than to just simply kind of go down in this relaxed, resting pose and hold on to it for a while. You got people shaking their heads if they see that in a combat situation. But if you're using it more for physical cultivation, or mental cultivation, or even spiritual cultivation, now this is making more sense. And Shaolin was starting to kind of put itself a little bit more in the forefront of, you know, this angle of using martial arts to cultivate themselves. And to this day, you go to the monastery and you ask them why they practice it, that's what they'll tell you. That's what they're training this stuff for. It's their way of achieving enlightenment. It's their way of, you know, getting that oneness of mind, body, and spirit. It's not necessarily to beat somebody down, though they can use it that way if they mean to. But now their practicing of martial arts has a, you know, it's multi-purpose. They got different, you know, it's not primarily just for one thing anymore. Now, while this was gaining traction during the Ming Dynasty, it still was not the primary reason that people were training in martial arts. Like, people were looking at it going, yeah, there is a health benefit to training in Chinese martial arts. You know, of course it's going to make you stronger. You're training in a physical activity. You know, as long as you don't get killed by the wrong guy, you probably will live long practicing this stuff. You know? But you really start seeing, you know, you really start seeing more of a focus on the whole health aspect, internal properties aspect, and all that after the Boxer Rebellion. After the Boxer Rebellion hit, that's when you really started seeing this shift in terms of martial arts. Like, by the time we reach late Qing Dynasty era, and then you start seeing, you know, Western powers moving in, martial artists really weren't looked at highly upon. Especially if you were a martial artist who was plying your trade by being a street performer. If you were one of those guys, you were considered the lowest of the low. And then you get foreigners coming in and, you know, shooting people in the head with guns and just completely steamrolling their military. And you have, like, these guys who are trying to, you know, fight back against the foreigners. And a lot of them were made up of, you know, yeah, there were some pretty skilled fighters, but there was also, you know, a lot of superstitious people and a lot of spiritual nonsense, like people who believe that by practicing Taoist mantras they can make themselves impervious from bullets. It didn't work. We know that. They definitely learned that the hard way. Even famous masters ended up getting killed with guns. And it also is, I forgot which, like there was a certain Baguazhang master ended up getting shot. Like he started a fight with a Japanese soldier, and he pulled out a knife to do it, which again is an interesting note for any of these internal artists out there who keep talking about this ultimate power you get. Why did he pull out a knife? If you're really good at internal arts, your hands and fists should be enough, right? Why'd you pull out a knife to defend yourself? Why practice weapons at all if the ultimate power is supposed to be in your bare hands? All these internal arts have a weapon you're supposed to study at the end. Never mind. This is not this type of video. Guy ended up getting shot at the end. Like, he pulls out a knife, the soldiers show up, he tried to escape over a wall, and they shot his ass. So, all these artists were learning the hard way that, look, first of all, people aren't appreciating us, as people, like they're looking down on us, and now we're reaching a point where our combat skills aren't even necessary anymore. They're outdated, they're being beaten by someone simply pointing a rifle at us and firing. What the fuck? And one of these people who was reaching that crisis of faith was Sun Wukong. And if you know anything about Chinese martial arts, you know who Sun Wukong is. So many people revere this guy as like the internal master, or the guy who wrote about Chinese internal martial arts. And his writings are very influential. People are still using his terms and his way of thinking to this day. In fact, he was so influential that he ended up developing like his own way of practicing Tai Chi became in itself its own style. Sun style Tai Chi Chuan. His daughter, who recently died, was also renowned for, because she practiced, he taught her. She got pretty good at it and started teaching others. She's still revered, for, what she introduced in the Chinese martial arts, her teachings, into the whole internal stuff. So, but the thing is, back in the past when he was younger, he trained with many of the masters of the day. He practiced with Xing Yi Chuan masters and befriended them. Practiced, Baguazhang, practiced Tai Chi Chuan. Got really good at it. And then his friends died. His contemporaries were getting killed all around him. And now he's reaching this point where he's like, wait a second. What good are these skills if we're getting shot? It doesn't matter, like, how good we get at it. I mean, at first they thought they were on top of the world. Anyone they fought, they beat down. He was training with people who were undefeated. Then the Bots Rebellion comes and goes, and his friends are dead. And now he's like, what good are these skills? What's the point?
Let me know.
Wait, there is a point, isn't there? If you're not training in it just for combat. What if you're doing this for another reason? What if this is for self-cultivation? What if this is for philosophical reasons? What is this for? What if you're doing this to be a more enlightened being? Maybe that's what this is all about. He starts going back into past writings, seeing this stuff about not exposing one's muscles and bones, seeing this stuff about, cultivating your breath, all that, and his writings started being geared toward that. He gave martial arts a new purpose. The internal arts is about developing yourself internally. It's about developing one's mind and body. That's what it's for. And that's what makes the internal arts superior to the external ones. It's all about combat to them. That's debasing oneself. That's all. Because of course to him, using that, he see all his friends die trying to use it for straight up combat. So to him, that's a worthless endeavor now. And remember, this guy became very influential with his writings and his books because he was a scholar. He was a very learned individual. So a lot of his writings, were written in that classical Chinese and written in that, that philosophical way that would appear to the more intelligent person reading them. And this has pretty much dominated the talk about Chinese barehanded internal arts, where you're training in this stuff to cultivate yourself, and that it's somehow a more superior skill than just external skills. And even though the funny thing is, internal and external, the definition has changed over time. Before it had to do with training in a martial art that was internally developed within the country. Now it became something that it was internally training some internal power. But it always ends up being better than the external, whether the external meaning a foreign martial art or from a foreign or an external philosophy, or even an external stylist, somebody who didn't learn the inner secrets of your school. The internal always ends up being better, no matter what the definitions may mean. And when it comes to the barehanded fighting, it became more of a superior practice to practice it for self-cultivation rather than for combat training. And I'm thinking all this development over time, over these many years, is the reason why now you got people practicing barehanded techniques and they can't fight. Or while you're seeing these barehanded techniques, you'll see certain movements that's like, how do you use that? Sometimes the reason why you don't know how to use it is simply because either the teacher doesn't know, or because the movement is so weird and no one's bothered to show you the theory behind it. Sometimes there are weird movements that actually are pretty good in combat. But also, there's a reason why a weird movement is weird, is because it's just weird. There's something in there that just has nothing to do with combat. Maybe it's a dance move. You'll see a lot of that with certain sword forms. Certain really beautiful movements, they're there just because they're beautiful movements. You'll see another weird motion where you stand in one particular odd position for a second or two. What's that for? It's probably a leftover meditative practice. That stuff gets woven in. I'm not saying that, you know, there aren't weird movements in Chinese martial arts. Again, I must clarify that. In fact, that's why I had that series, Why They Do That videos. So I need to do more of those. There are weird movements that can be used. But there are also movements that are just there for cultivation. And that's why the arts are done the way they are now. And for a while, Chinese martial artists were content with that. Because, you know, as long as they can show these displays of power every now and then, like, you know, getting somebody to demonstrate and then they'll push the guy across the room, see, look how much power I have. You know, that was fine, right? And then they can prove their self-cultivation, and they seem very gentlemanly, learned individuals, despite the fact that their ancestors were not these genteel beings. You're more like, it's just funny how rowdy Chinese martial arts used to be compared to now. But things have been changing lately, haven't they? Nowadays, you're seeing Chinese martial arts having to like, no, this stuff isn't useless for combat. What the fuck? Now we're seeing more of that. Since the 80s onwards, there's been this whole thing of we're not weak, goddamn. And I think that latest disaster that happened for them, that MMA guy who, by the way, it's a fellow Chinese martial artist. He's an MMA dude, beating down another Chinese martial artist who's that, you know, supposed Tai Chi Chuan master, beating him down. The debate that caused in that country, the ripple effect of that is interesting to watch. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to what's been happening afterwards, but it's interesting. Everything from the government now trying to say that, okay, you can't call yourself a master of a martial art unless you actually know it. You can't just make up your own style anymore. These are things that are now being considered. You can't just accept any challenge. Like all this stuff. And meanwhile, other people are like, no, we need, look, the MMA guys are not the only people who can fight. We need to show that we can fight too, damn it. You know, there's more of a push to like, no, these skills are for, you know, combat. Like I was noticing certain shows even before this happened. I was noticing certain shows coming out of China talking about the combat effectiveness of older Chinese martial arts, like a whole TV special on different styles and showing people training under them, you know, reality TV style, and then showing these guys trying to fight against a more conventional dude and how well they held up. We're going to be seeing more of that, I'm sure, in the coming months and years, where they're going, like, you're going to see certain people going into traditional arts but hardcore practicing it to try to prove a point. And hell, even one of my viewers, a couple of videos back, had commented on how there's a guy who I think is using Wing Chun techniques in MMA now and winning. So you see more of like this whole thing of it's like we're coming full circle. First, these arts were used purely for combat. Then they started using it more of as a side thing, like, okay, yeah, it's good for combat, but it's also good for cultivation. Then there was this whole thing, no, it's mostly for cultivation. The combat thing is it's a nice little side effect. It's a good bonus, but that's not what you're supposed to be focusing on. If you're just primarily focusing on fighting, you're missing the point. And now we're like, no, but this stuff is pretty damn good for fighting, damn it. Okay? It's like, we're going to prove it, damn it. We're kind of, it's funny, we're going full circle now. So, yeah, I think I've kind of said what I've had to say about all this. I just wanted to kind of go over this kind of evolution of barehanded fighting in Chinese martial arts and how it changed over time, the influences that made it become what it is now, why it's the way it is, why people say that you practice, why people practice it the way they do, their reasons for practicing it that way, you know, just why it developed how it did. I will say this at the end of the day. Ultimately, even though I have my own particular beliefs on, you know, what makes a martial art, like, again, I feel like if you're practicing martial arts, you should, no matter what your end goal, whether you're doing it just as a hobby, you're doing it to improve your health, you're doing it to achieve some sense of enlightenment, or whether you're just straight up fighting with it, you should at least be able to defend yourself basically with it. Otherwise, just practice yoga or something. I'm not being dismissive. I'm not trying to be elitist. I'm just saying, don't waste your own time. If you're practicing a martial art, well, damn it, the term martial is in there. You should at the very least be able to defend yourself at a basic level. If you can't do that, something's wrong. Whether it's on your end or the teacher's end, the class structure, whatever. You don't have to practice it primarily for combat anymore. I mean, it's the 21st century. We've transformed it so much. I mean, hell, you could take up boxing and not necessarily do it just to be able to go into a boxing ring and just to beat somebody down the street. You can practice boxing just because you like boxing. It's fun hanging out with your friends and hitting the heavy bag. Nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that if you're learning it, at the end of the day, you know, you should at least be able to defend yourself at a very basic level. I'm not saying that you have to be at the level of like Bruce Lee or something. Because every skill that we learn, people are going to be getting it to different levels. I'm trying to teach myself Java right now. I'm not going to be at the level of like a Bill Gates or something. Okay? But I'm at least going to be at a level where I can at least just program, right? Some people are going to be good where they can program some basic stuff. Other people will be so good that they can come up with operating systems. Other people will just be hobbyists, or other people will be indie game developers. Everybody's got their own level to be at. But at the end of the day, if I'm going to be learning to code, then I should at least learn how to code. You get what I'm saying? If you're going to be practicing, if you're going to be learning to dance, whether you're going to be a professional dancer or you're just doing it to impress your friends, you should still at least be able to put a few steps together. If you're going to learn martial arts, you should know some basic fighting techniques. You should be able to at least defend yourself. If you can't do that, something's wrong. So, there's that. Hope you enjoyed that. So, according to this, I've now been streaming for 45 minutes. It says 44, 50 seconds, but fuck it, 45 minutes. So, what I'm going to do is from now until I guess you guys get sick of it, any questions related to this video, just hit me with. I do got the super chat on, I guess. So was it? I know that this thing set up where you can get certain questions prioritized. I have no idea how to set that up. I think it's set up. I don't know. If you want to do that, I'll definitely answer those directly. Otherwise, I'm just gonna have to go through the chat and try to pick questions out. But yeah, for the next few minutes, any questions related to what I would discuss, I'll answer now. And after that, I will then just answer questions until I cut it off. So there we go. So I'm going to start going through these and seeing if there's any. And also, actually, I do believe that there were some questions that, even though the video hadn't been done yet, that may have been related to what I was talking about already. So give me a second for me to look these up. Yeah, you know this is like all ghetto and stuff the way I... And one of these days I should show you how I do, like how I prepare for videos and how I set everything up. You would laugh. I swear you guys will be laughing if you see, you know, how I get things set up. Even how I have the lights set up here. Like, you know how my face is illuminated? It ain't professional. No, it's not professional at all. I got my phone's light on there to bring the light here. And then down there, I got one of the worm lights that you use for reading. Those USB worm lights shining up this way. I don't have professional lamps. I can't afford that yet. But like, this is how I do stuff. Like, it works. It's just not professional. Though Michael just asked a question that I'm gonna answer, even though it has nothing to do with this video. I'll answer it after we do those, because yeah, I need to get into that. Though, quick. Well, just quickly, just to indulge. I'll get into it later. So, let me see if I can go into the questions. Well, this is somewhat related. How do you feel about northern and southern style combat or weapons in Kung Fu? Okay. This to me seems like a two-pronged question. This is from Mr. Lee in the chat. How do you feel about northern and southern style combat or weapons? Okay, so I'll answer both. Northern and southern, you got to be careful when you're using those terms. I've actually done a video on this earlier. It's very easy to fall for the trap of going, oh, they're northern styles and they're southern styles, and northern styles are like this, and southern styles are like that, because if you take a really close look at these arts, you will find similarities. For instance, so many people say that, well, northern martial arts are primarily about kicking, and southern martial arts are primarily about punching. And then you see an art called Xingyi Chuan, which is mostly fists, and it was developed in the north. Or you see Baji Chuan, and it's mostly fists and elbows, and it was developed in the north. And then you go down south, and you see Choi Le Fo, which has several good kicks in it. Or you learn about Hungar and its special technique known as, you know, the shadowless leg, which is a kick. So you got to be really careful when you're defining these terms. You know, like, when I use the term northern and southern, I mostly use it just as the arts that were developed in the north and the arts that were developed in the south. And that's as far as I go. I don't like to put any other extra, you know, details on that. Like, I don't want to say, you know, well, the northern arts are like this or something like that. Because for every art that you want to say that, well, this is the way it goes, there's going to be an exception that breaks that rule. So you have to be careful when you're doing that. That being said, one thing I will say is that generally, the martial culture in the north seems to have been focused more on straight-up combat effectiveness in the battlefield. Generally speaking. While in the south, you saw the arts developing more as a personal combat thing. What I mean by that is, in the north, I see a lot of emphasis on weapons that, like for instance, in the north, swords, spears, you know, staffs, like or the arts that they practice were used by bodyguards, used by like warriors and so on and so forth. Their villages were known for producing a lot of great fighters that later on went into the military. I'm not saying that didn't happen in the south. It definitely did. But you see a lot of these, and even at their techniques, they're wide range, they're longer range. Everything's about, you know, fighting on the battlefield, fighting with straight up combat weapons. And then in the south, you see a lot of close range fighting. You see a lot of uses of weapons that are smaller, that you can use in alleyways or in private duels. You know, and there's a lot of pride on, like, hey, how good is your technique? I'll fight it. And, like, they'll just, you know, come at it close range, face to face. Not necessarily in a battlefield type of situation. Again, this is generally speaking. Very generally speaking. I know you can find examples of what I'm saying on either sides of this invisible north-south divide. But generally, if I'm going to be speaking in very general terms, that's one of the things I've seen. And I find it very interesting. And I think it lends different strengths. It's like a different martial culture, if you want to talk about it. Though, again, it's not as if people in the north don't mind, oh, you know martial arts? You know Kung Fu? Hey, I got a cousin over there who knows it too. I always set up a... This still happens, by the way. I'm hearing this still happens. Like, you go to like more of the rural villages. If you happen to be walking down the road and you happen to have a sword or something on your back, oh, you know Kung Fu? Hey, you got a moment? Hey, I got a couple of people. I keep hearing stories about this, which amuses me, but it probably would frighten somebody, like anybody from the West who went to China to train for a little bit, and they just happen to be walking over to a friend's house. Oh, you carry the Kung Fu weapons. Hey, Joe, come over here. So, And that happens a lot in the North as well as the South. So it's, but that's one of the things I've noticed. I find that interesting. Something else that I feel, you were talking about the weapons. Personally, I find that if we were I love researching different forms and like different weapons forms and different weapon fighting styles. And by the way, please excuse all the back and forth going on. I mean, this isn't my apartment. People keep moving back and forth. But my son knows better than to stay out here. You need to get back to your room.
I'm trying to get water.
I know. Anyway, sorry for the interruption. What was I saying? The weapons training, the more I research the older weapons forms, or at least look at the basics, the more I'm impressed. You know, like when you kind of skim away all the, you know, fancy moves and gymnastics and stuff like what you see in contemporary wushu, and you look at, especially like the basic training or the basic movements and stuff, it's like, wow, these guys knew what they were doing. Like, there's a lot of really sneaky, sometimes really effed up techniques that they developed with their weapons that I find really cool. Not just with the Jian, but with the Dao, with the Bun, the staff. You know, just all these, they just got really cool techniques. What's sad, however, is that there are some weapons that look like they were really effective, but they don't get taught all that much anymore. Like, there are some people who believe that, you know, like they keep asking, did the Chinese ever use shields? I never see it. Yeah, they did. They did use shields. In fact, you look at old martial arts treatises, like old combat manuals, even Chi Ji Guan has a section like where you see guys with their shields and even long spears fighting against other guys. But because of the emphasis on the more barehanded or personal training or civilian type martial arts, you don't see that anymore. And like the only one I can think of that is still taught to civilians is the rattan shield and Dao combinations. Every now and then you will see that, but it's rare. It's a shame because, and also it's a shame is that sometimes when I see that being practiced, there's a lot of gymnastic stuff thrown in. You know, you can't help that. That stuff kind of wove into Chinese martial arts way before contemporary wushu showed up. But even then, you can still see some combat effectiveness in the basics at the very least, and I find those to be really interesting and cool. I think overall, the stuff is effective. Like, and to go back to the northern and southern skills, I think every style has something to offer. I think every style has, you know, some technique or some combat theory that if somebody's serious about it and really trains in it, you know, properly, maybe they might have to modernize some of its methods or something, but there's something there that should offer some kind of, you know, something valuable for you in some way. Now, having said that, there is a dude that I had referenced in one of my earlier videos. Remember that video back when I was talking about that one martial arts master who pretty much was saying, if I'm going to be blunt, the guy was pretty much saying in his own nice way, these people suck. Nobody trains in these arts the way they should anymore. He had, I should probably put up a link later in the future. Ben, are you done with your water?
No.
Well, when you're done with the water, there's no reason to keep hanging around moving back and forth. You're being distracting. That guy actually compared some skills. He actually compared some styles. Some of them, I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say what he was saying because I'm no expert, okay? So I'm the last person to go, oh, this style sucks. This style's pretty good. This dude, however, was much more liberal with his tongue when he started describing certain arts. And there were some that he's like, yeah, this seems interesting. And others, this doesn't really look all that effective. Or others, you'd be like, well, I could tell that the style itself might have been interesting, but the people practicing it had no clue what they were doing. Like, that's what he was saying. I really should put up a link to some of the interviews that he had. They are just wow. They're really biting. If you thought what he said about just practice in general in China was rough, wait till you see what he said about certain styles and certain stylists. They're like straight up fighting words. So, but he was a well-known Chinese martial arts master. So, Ben, enough. Enough. I told you not to do this.
Okay.
Go drink over there, then head back into your room until I'm done.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. Anyway, I think I've kind of beaten that. I hope that, I've answered the question adequately enough. And later on, if I can put up that link, I will put up that link. So I got to find those interviews again. They're really, really interesting. So that was from Mr. Lee. And now let me see. Okay, so going down the list. And start practicing. Do I have a favorite historical martial artist? That's sort of going off the topic, but it's kind of still in there. Do I have a favorite historical martial artist, even as recent as Jackie Chan or Bruce Lee? Tough to say. There's some that I could make a whole video on this, because there's several different martial artists in the past that I like for different reasons. I like certain Bagua-zhang, the early Bagua-zhang stylists, under forming their own styles, because each one had a different, interesting personality, which lent itself to the style that they were studying. Though there was one particular Bagua martial artist, I'm trying to remember his name. He didn't found a style. He was practicing one of the different forms, and the guy was known to just beat dudes down. Like, he was not a nice guy. He was just straight up, I'm gonna knock you the fuck out, or straight up kill you. And he didn't care. Like, he would go into duels. The thing that cracked me up about him was, in the past, whenever they were setting up contests, they were setting up duels between different artists, or they would have late time matches, fighters would usually have a banner or a sign with some really flowerful freaking name, like, or title. You know, I am, you know, Mr. Lee of the Flying Fists of the Pagoda of the South, or I happen to have the ultimate thunderbolt kicks of West Wind, whatever. Like, just some really extravagant stuff. And he would just simply have a sign with, I hit you and you die. Which is hilarious to me, not just because of how blunt it is, look, I'm going to hit you and you die. But that's, everyone else just had these really long, colorful names that, I hit you once, you die. I'm not here to play around. Which, by the way, to kind of go back a little bit in my original topic, again, even during the Ming Dynasty onward, the general consensus by martial artists, real straight up martial artists, was, if you're going to fight, fight. If you want to look pretty, look pretty. Don't combine the two. That statement of fighters with flowery fists and embroidered legs, that's an insult. If somebody says you have flowery, especially in the past, if they told you that you had flowery fists and embroidered legs, they're basically saying you look pretty but you can't fight. That was the consensus. That was the hardcore thing of, if you're just trying to, yeah, this guy can't fight. It's kind of funny how that's the consensus these days, when people are looking at Kung Fu and they say, yeah, that stuff looks pretty, but it don't look practical. Even back then, in China, people were saying that. The hardcore fighters were saying that. And this one Bagua fighter seems to exude that whole thing of, look, I'm not here to look pretty. I'm not here to come up with fancy titles. I'm here to knock you out and possibly kill you in this match. Are you going to waste my time, or are you going to fight? Like, that's... You see this thing over and over again, and just the fact that this guy was a Bagua-zhang master, and Bagua-zhang is a so-called internal art, that's what amuses me about this dude. Gotta remember his name. Especially since I only read from him from one damn source, and I lost the source. I'll find it. About more modern contemporaries, if I'm going to go into modern, because now I'm thinking of, I should do a video on the different ancient martial arts that I should do a video on that. That would be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let me go into the contemporaries because they're easier for me to mention names and stuff. Bruce Lee, obviously. Even though he's not original. What I mean by he's not original is that so many people, you know, credit him for the whole, you know, take out the useless stuff, keep the, you know, the stuff that works. You know, you should be training in martial arts to fight. You know, not be stuck in set routines. He was not the first person to say that. Even in China, there was something like, hell, anyone heard of Zuran style? Or natural school style? The whole style was predicated on the original founder going, too many of these people are practicing and they don't know how to fight. Too many people are practicing useless techniques. We need to go back to basics. We need to go back to natural movement, natural fighting skills. That's what's going to make it. The whole style was developed around that. Or hell, people call it water boxing nowadays. And I'm going to butcher the name again, Ryu Bafa, which literally translates to 6 harmonies, 8 methods. That's what the style is. 6 harmonies, 8 methods. What that basically means is, In Chinese martial arts, it doesn't really matter what Chinese martial art you're studying. If you are learning under a dude who knows his salt, sooner or later you're going to hear one of these two terms, especially if you're practicing an internal art. The 6 harmonies or the 8 methods. The 6 harmonies mean the 6 different points on your body that you got to align, the 8 different methods of combat and defense. You see this in Tai Chi Chuan, you see this in Bagua Zhang, you see this in Xing Yi Chuan, you see this in Tong Bei's. 6 harmonies, Mantis Fest. So many people reference these things. Liu Ba Fa, or the 6 harmonies, 8 methods style of fighting, is literally somebody going, look, why don't we just simply take the best basic training methods and just use that to fight with? Why do I need to learn an individual style? So it's basically an early form of Chinese MMA if you think about it. Look, we know what the 6 harmonies are. We know what the 8 methods are. Use that. I don't need to learn your fancy form. That was the thinking, which is why it cracks me up that nowadays, if you want to learn it, usually the guy says, well, if you want to learn Liu Ba Fa, you need to learn the other 3 internal arts first. You mean the 3 arts that people say that it takes a lifetime to master? You want me to learn 3 of those before I can even touch Liu Ba Fa? I mean, I understand the thinking behind it. It sort of makes sense, since Liu Ba Fa takes a little bit from here and there. Learning the original sources will help you to understand the method you're using better. You're like, oh, this came from this. I already know how to use that, so now I can incorporate it when I mix it with this, that, and that, and this. But at the end of the day, if you just learn, you got to learn the basics of the 6 harmonies and 8 methods anyway when learning any of these arts, so why do you need to learn them? Whatever. Anyway, I like Bruce Lee for like being the one to bring this sort of thinking to the forefront in modern day. We kind of needed him to show up when he did. And I love seeing like that really early freaking footage of him in that one martial arts, tournament where you see a little bit of his real fighting style. Clue. What you see him doing in the movies is not necessarily his real fighting style, especially when he starts doing all the high kicks and stuff. That's not really how he fought, but whatever. His actual fighting technique is hella interesting to watch. Because I see 2 things with the way he fights. Well, really, 3 things. 1, he loves to get in close and punch. Which makes sense. He trained in Wing Chun first. But he just loves getting in there and cracking your skull with that fist. 2, he's ridiculously used to fighting. Just really freaking used to fighting. He's just so casual with it. People who are like really, like they get intense, they do all this and all that. He's very casual. Hands are sometimes really low. That's somebody who's like, I don't care where my hands are, I'm hitting you anyway. You gotta be comfortable with yourself and have a lot of freaking experience to do that. And his confidence just exudes with how he moves. And the third thing is that he relies on his speed so much that like that whole thing of my style is the way of the interception fist. Yeah, like he can read the second you flinch, he's got an answer for you. It takes a hell of a lot of skill to be able to get to that point. So the minute the guy flinches, you know where they're coming from, what angle, and you know what to come back with. Any of you guys, I know many of you guys practice your own form of martial arts. You know what I'm talking about. To get to the point where the second the guy opens up, oh, I just hit him with this. And you crack them before they even finish their technique. It takes a while to get that, and he does it smoothly, confidently. So he was not a fake. I get comments every now and then, Bruce Lee was garbage. Yeah, it's very easy for people to say that about a dead man that they're not going to fight. Look at whatever. I really I enjoy him for that aspect. Jackie Chan I enjoy, and I've mentioned this before. I enjoy watching him because to me he embodies one of the biggest things about Chinese martial arts, and that's adaptation. We are highly amused by the fact that the guy can just pick up anything and fight with it. Toothbrush, newspaper, rubber chicken. It doesn't matter. He will find some way to use that in his movies as a weapon, and we'll laugh at it, but he also does it with a ridiculous amount of skill. Where you can go, I know this is a movie, but I could see him beating the crap out of people, a whole room of them doing that. I wouldn't be surprised if he could do that. And if you're learning Chinese martial arts, when you reach a certain level, you should be able to do that. Kung Fu is a lot about adaptation. You have to adapt to your surroundings, you have to adapt to your opponent. If you can't do that, if you're relying on just set routines, you're going to lose, which is, I know, something that Bruce Lee said all the time, but believe it or not, that's something you're supposed to know in Chinese martial arts already. people were forgetting that. That's why he had to show up. I'm like, no, but that is a Kung Fu staple, being able to adapt. The fact that he can do that so well, just goes to show that he knows what he's doing. There are people even in China who's like, he just knows fake martial arts. I'm not so sure. In fact, I don't think so. From the way he moves, he's been practicing for quite some time, especially with weapons. In fact, that's the one thing about Jackie Chan. Some people think that his greatest thing are his stunts, and he is damn good at stunts. But I think his strongest strength, it's obvious to me that what he's an expert at, what his forte is, are weapons. Has to be weapons. Otherwise, how could he be able to use all these inanimate objects so well? Fighting you with, with the weapons that he does, inanimate objects. You gotta be damn good with weapons to be able to do what he does. I think that's his secret sauce. That's his core strength. He's damn good with weapons. And if you look at his earlier movies, you can easily see that. Because he fights with just about everything you can think of. In fact, the only weapon I think that the only weapon I can think of that I haven't seen him really use very well, but he still can use it, is a straight sword. But the dough, he's damn good with that. Staff, spear, tonfa, or the Chinese call it the crutch, sword and shield. I've seen him use so many freaking weapons, and he does it well. The bench, weapons are his thing. He's a joy to watch with a weapon in his hand. So, and then one more before I move on to another question, because I'm spending a lot of time on this one alone. Donnie Yen. I'm glad Donnie Yen is getting his props now, but people were sleeping on him back in the late 80s, early 90s. I was seeing his stuff back then just going, oh my god, this dude. The guy is ridiculously talented, but he also believes in real fighting. You can tell from the way he choreographs his films. You can tell from the interviews he's had. He doesn't just train to look good on the screen. He trains so that he's good at what he does. And it's not just Chinese martial arts he's trained in. He's trained in Taekwondo. That's why his kicks look so sharp. We all know that he's dabbled in MMA. If you've seen some of it, we call it Flashpoint here, or Killzone here. It was actually Shapalong, and then later on I forget what the other one is. But he uses MMA in those films. He's even incorporated it in some of his other films. We know he's played as Ip Man. People know him for Ip Man these days. We mentioned Donnie Yen. Oh yeah, I saw the Ip Man movies. I saw him way before that. And he was phenomenal in those films. And it's he's in his 50s now, and we're still like, this guy... It's when is he going to slow down? When is your body going to finally start showing its age? This guy is just phenomenal. He's fast, he's strong, he's ridiculously talented. He absorbs just about any technique you teach him. It's amazing to me how much he's able to pick up. To me, he's like a hardcore martial artist. The only other person I can think of who just gives that sense of intensity to me is Michael Jai White. That guy, you could tell, is also hardcore about martial arts training. He focuses more on the Japanese side of things, but that same level of intensity of this is what I do, I get off those two guys. All right. Let me go back. I've spent way too much time on that question, but yeah, I really need to do a video on some of the more ancient guys that I really like. Maybe some massive flying mantis technique. Go back. Okay, so how effective do you find Tai Chi Chuan against, say, something like Western boxing? Assuming we're talking about legit training, no McDojos or the fake masters. Well, first of all, we got to establish that Tai Chi Chuan, I personally believe the theory that Tai Chi Chuan originally came from more military type techniques. The manual that you see, Chi Chi Guan's manual on effective military training, you can actually download this manual. It's in public comments. You can get your hands on it. You can see the images in the pictures, and there's a lot of Tai Chi type movements in there, but it was meant for his military men. And those movements themselves look an awful lot like long fist. In fact, that's another thing I believe. If you look at Tai Chi Chuan and you look at how it moves, if you speed up its movements, it looks like another form of long fist. Because it is. So when you consider that, and then you consider that long fist is pretty much just a pugilistic form of fighting, people have kind of forgotten that. especially in contemporary wushu. Nowadays, all they do is just dance with it. But it's just, long fist is just fighting, okay? There's certain beautiful movements in there, like especially if you practice Chachuan, very beautiful looking. Or Piguazhang, which is a lot of long flowing. Piguazhang, by the way, is a crazy art to watch. It looks like they got no bones in their arms. The way the way the arms move, the shoulders move, and all that. Just loose shoulders, very loose joints, and they just spin their arms almost windmill style and just smash into you. Or Tongbei, through the back boxing, which is another long fist type style, which is also very rapid fire punches. You train in those styles effectively, I think they could work against a boxer, especially since, again, a lot of their movements also go toward the legs, and boxing doesn't really... I hesitate to say that. I know sports boxing is all head and shoulders, but I know those people who just practice boxing purely for self-defense, they don't neglect the legs. They may not be kicking, but they're not leaving their legs exposed either. So I think it would be an interesting match. I do think that somebody practicing Tai Chi Chuan to fight, good luck finding a school like that. But if you're like practicing, like, you know, straight up, I'm using Tai Chi Chuan to defend myself and fight, and you go up against a boxer, getting past a boxer's defense will be interesting, because remember, boxers fight like this. They're right here. So you're not going up against somebody who's fighting like this. So the arms are not out. Getting at the arms, Tai Chi Chuan really likes intercepting punches or kicks and whatever, or like just kind of hooking and then coming in and going with that. Or like, you know, like as the attack is coming in, you fold back to absorb the attack and then kind of go forward again. That's why there's a lot of like that backward step, forward step in Tai Chi Chuan practice. If you notice, there's always a rock back, rock forward, take a step, rock back, rock forward, maybe at a different angle. Boxing's going to be a little bit tricky because there's a lot of rapid fire, boom, 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 and the fists are here. So you don't have easy access to pulling in their arm to come at them. But that being said, I think, you know, a guy, if you're training Tai Chi Chuan to fight, you got an encyclopedia of different techniques to use. And a lot of techniques do help you get in close. Especially if you're really good at your push hands, you're learning the techniques to be able to fight in close. So if you can get in close and get in that clench and really open up that tight defense, you can stand a chance. I do think, again, if you're learning to fight. If you're not using it to fight, well, we know what happens. We all saw the video. Just saying. Just saying. Oh, boom. I don't know how I missed this question. I'm sorry, SSTHS. Is there much in CMA about using barehanded skills to defeat weapons such as swords, stabs, and spears and short sticks? Yes and no. There's a little bit about it, but not all that much. It's kind of interesting that contemporary wushu has a lot of demonstration forms, like a lot of, you know, performance sequences where sometimes you'll see a barehanded dude going up against one or two guys with weapons at once, sometimes three, and they've come up with a lot of crazy, you know, showy, you know, performance-oriented techniques to deal with all these attacks coming at you. But those came from somewhere. There is some stuff about, oh man, you're barehanded, what the hell do you do? Generally, you'd be using the same type of principles you'd be using if you were using a short weapon against a long one. Get inside that defense and hurt them quickly. And good luck doing that. That's all I can tell you. Again, there is some training for that, but not much, and good luck finding a school that will train in it. The most I've seen with certain schools is you against the knife. And we all know that a lot of barehand against knife techniques taught these days are very questionable. So, yeah. All I'm going to say is, to answer, yeah, there are techniques for that, but in the modern day, good luck finding them. They're there, but you're going to have to really look. You got to really look. You really have to look. So, anyway. Do I think, alright, SSLMTH also asked, do I think the specialization of sports martial arts being used with safety checks and rules has caused them to become more efficient in combat than TMA? Yes and no. When you're practicing a traditional martial art, if the guy training in that traditional school is focusing more on just punching the air, and you're not doing two-man forms, you're not sparring, yeah, you're in trouble. Because when you're training in a sport-oriented art, you're going to be sparring. You're going to be doing body conditioning. You're going to have to learn to take a hit. When all you're doing is punching the air, none of that's happening. So you're just not prepared. Having said that, if you are in a traditional school where you are going to be learning these two-hand forms, you are going to be learning some sparring, you are going to be doing conditioning. Let's say you were lucky enough to train in one of Adam Hsu's schools, or you're training under one of his students who opened up their own schools, like Jason Tsu or something, or Ted Mancuso in the West Coast. You're in those schools, you're in good hands. Then you're getting their body conditioning, you're getting, you're going to be sparring, you're going to be learning how to use your techniques. And now all of a sudden you got an advantage over the sport-oriented dude because now you're learning how to use your techniques with no rules. Now, this opens up a huge can of worms. This is reminding me back when MMA first came out, because that's what traditional martial artists were saying. Yeah, you guys are good, but you got rules. To which the MMA guys go, then step in the ring, motherfucker. And of course the TMA guys go, yeah, I would, but I have to go home to turn off the oven in the house where I live. So yeah, that debate didn't go anywhere. But there is something to be said. These days, I don't necessarily think that I am not in any condition to go up against any MMA dude at all. Okay? But back when I was more in fighting trim, I did go up against guys who were more trained towards that. And they were always surprised with how I was able to deal with them. Because they thought, well, he's a traditional guy and he's not used to getting hit. And, all I got to do is just grapple him and tie him up. And they would end up getting grappled. They would end up getting thrown to the floor. Or I would do something. Hey, we don't train to do that. Yeah, of course you don't train to do that. Because you're training to fight for a trophy. And I don't know what's going on over there. It don't sound good. I might have to end this soon. Anyway, like I was saying, yeah, they're training to win for a trophy, and I'm training to protect my ass. I mean, well, honestly, I was also training because I just like martial arts training. And let's just say, like, I know many of you guys practice martial arts, different arts. If any of you guys ever showed up at the house, and we're chilling, and I find out you know martial arts, and I got a backyard, we're going to spar. Even if it's just for a couple of minutes. We're going to spar. It's gonna happen. Women you just still go past. She knows Taekwondo. You've already traded a couple of blows. We're going to have more longer extended ones sooner or later.
Shut up.
It's just going to happen. I just happen to like that sort of thing. I don't, it's not like I want to get beaten up. No, I just like the whole trading knowledge thing. But because of that, I have to get used to having different techniques coming at me all the time. And so I train myself to have to deal with that and seeing moves coming at me from different angles and from different areas. I'm not just expecting, well, you're only going to hit me up here because it's against the rules to attack my legs. Or I'm only going to be dealing with punches because it's against the rules to use kicks. I'm expecting anything to come at me. And that's how I trained. And I was training with hardcore guys who thought that way. When you're training in a sport-oriented art, no matter how intense it's going to be, and MMA is very freaking intense. So those guys, I think, are really damn complete. But even had said that, there's still certain things they can't do that I'm expecting somebody to try to do, or that I think that I can do. That gives me a little bit of an edge. That gives the TMA guys an edge if they're trained to use it. If they're not trained to be that flexible, to fight without rules, to be willing to take a hit, to be able to take a hit, to just go in there and fight instead of trying to look pretty and proper. If they're not doing any of that stuff, then yeah, an MMA guy is just going to walk all over them. That's just how it is. I know TMA guys don't want to hear that, but it's the truth. You can't escape reality no matter how. Basically, if you are not training to fight, how can you expect to fight? If I'm not training to play the piano, I can't be expected to play a concerto. You can't put me in front of a piano and go, okay, you've watched a lot of people play piano, now play. You did a lot of air piano, so you should be good enough. No, it doesn't work that way. So, but having said that, if you can't do it, there you go. Just like I said, the TMA guys, they got a lot of techniques at their disposal, and if they're training in them in the right way, I think they have an edge against the sports guys simply because they're open to use whatever, whereas the sports guys are trained to fight a specific way. Of course, you can make a counter-argument toward that. Well, the TMA guys are fought to do a specific way too, and the MMA guy has a flexible enough of mind of going, this guy's style is mostly grappling, so let me go this way. So you can go back and forth on that one. Let me see. The problem is I keep finding the original question, then when I scroll down I screw myself over. Okay, so that. Have I read The History of Chinese Martial Arts from Antiquity to the 21st Century by Peter Lorge? I have not, but thank you. Now I will. That's another book to add. That's another book to add. I should, I've read, like I said, I've read the Shaolin book. Again, if you guys are interested, it's worth picking up, or pick up the audiobook version of this. The Shaolin History, Religion, and the Chinese Martial Arts. It's by, I never gave the name of the guy. It's by Mir Shahar. I probably need to type that down in the, yeah, I probably need to put that in the comment section, don't I? Yeah, that's what I thought. I'll put that right in there. M-E-I-R. There it is. Ba-dum, ba-dum. Ba-dum. Boom. There you go. That's the name of the guy who wrote the book. And again, it's the Shaolin Monastery, History, Religion, and the Chinese Martial Arts. Long book, good book. If you don't got time to read it, if you got to commute, get the audiobook version. It's really good. Other books I've mentioned, like the Chinese Martial Arts manuals. That's a good one for picking up history. Professor Kangye Wu has a smaller book on just a concise history of martial arts development. Also really interesting. But yeah, this one right over here, this book you just mentioned, yeah, I'm picking that one up. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. What are your thoughts on... What? I cannot... Is this spelled right? Elik-Chuen? This is Fred Smith's question. I don't think I've ever heard of Elik-Chuen. Or is this supposed to be Eli-Chuen? Or its applications towards grappling style martial arts like jiu-jitsu and wrestling? I've never heard of this style. Unless you've misspelled it or something. But I have not heard of that one, so I can't really, you know, say anything about it. I'm sorry. Each one, I don't know. That's something that I don't know. I don't know if you're talking about like each one, which is mind boxing. What do I think like each one? I've never heard of it. It might be something. Whatever. I don't know. It's something I might want to look up so I could properly answer your question. Maybe it's worth a video, but I've never heard of it. Somebody else, can I give my opinion on the 13th century European effigy with the supposed Dian? Yeah, I've heard of it. Supposedly, the guy is, like, if you look at the fittings and the sword, it looks like there's, like, Eastern or Chinese fittings on there. It seems legit, but I don't really have anything else to say on the matter. I have heard of it, though. Useless. Can I think of any particular stances, techniques that are considered useless in the traditional curriculum because the forms exaggerate them? This is a tricky question to answer. Okay. One movement that I will say... Okay, one thing I'll say is that there are a lot of movements that you'll train in that because of how they're trained in and nobody gives you an example, they end up being useless. A good example I can give is with the sword. You may sometimes see certain movements where they'll either slash forward with the sword, or the Jian, or they'll stab forward, but they'll do it while leaning forward and standing on one leg while their back leg gets risen up really high and bent back, almost touching their head. Does this make any sense? Like, you guys know the movement I'm talking about? They kind of like lean forward and they're standing on one leg and the other leg is held behind them and up and kind of bent. That movement, yeah, there's really no reason to do that in martial arts at all. But what it's supposed to be telling you is just put all your weight on the front foot. We've all done this. How many times have we reached for something and we can't quite get it, but then when you lift the back leg and lean forward a bit more and you hold the leg out a little bit to balance yourself, to counterbalance you putting all your weight forward, I got it. That's what the technique is trying to teach you. You're trying to reach the guy, he's just out of reach, you know, like you thought he was in range, and you make the move, and he just stepped out, but if you just a few more inches, just kind of extend yourself a little bit more real quick, that's what it's supposed to do. But notice, you don't need to stretch your leg all the way to hell up high and bend like that to do it. But because it looks more beautiful, that's why people train in it now, and because they don't understand that that's the meaning behind it, now people see that and go, it's useless. Or how to do the swallow sword. There's a movement with the sword where you may have seen it. It kind of goes like this. That's the basic way to do it. And the basic way to do it is, it's kind of like one of those, like your sword is kind of hanging down, like that. Like, you don't know, fencers may have noticed this. You might be doing a riposte, that riposte, and a move is kind of coming in that you didn't expect, and you go, oh! And you're like that. This is a kind of weird angle to defend yourself. Like, you kind of defend yourself. You went like that, and the blade's here, and their blade's there. How do you respond? I mean, you can try to go back like that, but they can easily see that coming. Or, you can turn that, oh! into this. That's the swallow sword. Simple, right? But nowadays, you see people doing the swallow sword like all fancy, like they'll twist it this and this and this and this and then go like that. Yeah, that's where it starts to get useless. Because now all you're doing is just twirling it like a baton, and then you go like this. Like, hell, even Yang Jwing Ming talks about it in his sword basics video. He actually talks about the swallow sword. He does it in that really fancy way, and then at the end he goes, how to use it? I don't know. Because there's no real use for any of this. But it's now become part of the curriculum of basic sword movement, so there you go. That should give you an example. The basic one I want to say is, many times you'll see moves that are straight up useless, and it's either because you're now training in an exaggerated way and you don't realize what the basis was, so it's become useless, or hell, here's a good one, before I can move on. The figure eight. You see this a lot in weapons training. It does have a use, but only if you break it down. If all you're doing, like, hell, Skull talks about this all the time. You know, if you're just doing this, that's all you're doing. There's nothing to it. You know, the guy can just step around you and whack you in the back of the head or whatever. But if you just do this, now it's a move. But it's part of this. See? This is useless. This is not. See? That is not useless. That's got a use. Move coming in, deflect, cut. Move coming in there, deflect, cut. This, yeah, that's just nothing. But you see a lot of people doing this, and then that, and then all this other stuff. And it's, yeah, that's how you can kind of tell the difference between a useless move and an actual, proper. So those are some examples. You're also talking about stances. Here's one that is still debated to this day. Mabu, horse stance. There are some places now, believe it or not, there are some Chinese places now that may not even train you in that anymore. It's fucking useless. Who the hell is going to stand in horse stance? Horse stance was primarily used to train your legs so it can be strong enough so that all your stances are stable. You rarely will see it used in a fight. So, if you're going to be talking about... Remember what I said about stances. Stances are really freeze frames. It's moves in transition. So you may find yourself transitioning from one stance into horse into another in one smooth motion. In that case, it's not useless. But just standing in it? Probably is. Again, some schools are straight up... I'm noticing certain modern schools, fuck the horse stance. I'm thinking it's because of their own horror stories of having to train in it as a kid. 7 minutes, horse stance. I saw you move 8 minutes. Yeah, those days of torture tend to traumatize some people. So, yeah. Let me see for more questions, because I'm running out of time. I didn't expect this to be this long. It's already 1:30 now. It's been 1:30. I'm supposed to be cutting it off now, but... Am I going to be teaching my son my knowledge? I already am. He's about the only person that I feel confident enough to show any of my techniques to. And even then, her too. But after a while, with her, it's more of an exchange. Like, she just basically wants to be able to fight with her techniques again, so I'm just going to be like, okay, this is how I fight, and things are yours, and now we can beat the crap out of each other. My son, I want to teach basic stuff. Like right now, I got him going through Wu Bu Chuan, 5 stance. I'm going to be moving him from that to 10 Tui, and then from that, we'll see. But ultimately, I would like to put him into a proper school because, again, I don't think I'm good enough to, like, teach. Like, I can show basics, you know, or if somebody already knows what they're doing, then we can, like, you know, kind of, like, work with each other and build each other up. But as far as me, like, I'm your chief, no, I don't think I'm at that level. But, yeah, I am showing my son some stuff. Right now, he's learning 5 stance, so he can get used to stance training. And then I'm going to put him through Tantway. And then after Tantway, I'm going to, you know, move on from there and see what else he can do. It looks more European to you. BMX, the thing is about your question on that, is just to go back again, the reason why I don't have anything much to add to that effigy with the Gen is because I kind of feel the same way about you. I think that maybe he got some Eastern fittings put on at the most, but it was probably put on a Western blade. You see that a lot in reverse in China, where you'll see weapons repurposed, like a blade from this area, but fittings of this area. It happens a lot. So, I mean, yeah, it probably does have Chinese fittings on it. Like, you're probably looking at a sword that is like a mix of different fittings and a different blade. But that's happened all over, so that's why I said I can't really remark on it. It's an interesting oddity, but nothing to me to go, oh my god, they had Chinese stuff. There's trading going on all the time. I mean, hell, I know, well, this is Black History Month, might as well get into it. You'd be amazed how much trading was going on between African countries and other countries. They weren't, you know, I know people like think of Africa as a bunch of tribal guys with just spears. No, it wasn't like that all the time, you know, especially in the northern areas. There was a lot of trading going on with all these different cultures, and all these cultures knew of each other. And there was a lot of, you know, mixing here and there. So, anyways, and so to the Viking Age, so you're always talking about the lines of I would like to ask how you feel about the promotion of fighting styles that emphasize gross motor movements as opposed to more precise and controlled movements. That's a good question. That's a good thing to jump into. Thank you. That was from Surkov Jaeger, and I hope I didn't butcher your name. I've actually discussed this with a friend of mine way back. I should have made this a video, but that was like a couple of years ago. If he's watching this right now, he probably is chuckling to himself. I think that there is something to be said about training somebody in gross motor movements. Okay. I think it's a good idea. If you want to train somebody how to fight quickly and get them used to fighting, and also to be able to find something to rely on in a high stressful situation where suddenly you're in fight or flight and more sophisticated stuff is no longer going to be the thing that you can go for, yeah, it makes total sense to rely on that. Because at the end of the day, when your mind is just all you can do is basic shit. So if you're fighting and your entire fighting style is built around your basic movement, you're good to go. No matter what, your fighting weapons will always be with you. It's not going to suddenly vanish because you panicked. And that's my phone. That fell down and vibrated because it's my light. And I am turning that off because I don't know who that is. I told you, this is not a professional setup. Anyway. And it fell again because I had to move the wire. I think that's my sign that I really need to cut this off soon. I got to start cooking. Anyway. Yeah, gross motor movements and you turning that into weapons, really good freaking idea. In fact, some Chinese forms are actually based on that. Believe it or not, there are some Chinese martial arts where at least the basic movements are supposed to be based on gross motor movement with little fine-tuning. It's when you get to the advanced stages that the fine-tuning comes in. Pigbo Zhang, I think, is kind of a good example of that. Because a lot, I mean, yeah, when you see the move, it looks like they got no damn bones in their arms, and it's really fast and crazy movements, but when you break it down, all you're really doing is windmilling your arms and slamming them into your opponent. The fine-tuning comes in how you control that movement. And this is where the other side of the argument comes in. I think that for basic fighting, gross motor movements are great. For self-defense, really good idea. If you're trying to master fighting, you're going to have to move on to the finesse sooner or later. You're going to have to. And I can give you, and here's my argument for that. Look at what's happening to MMA right now. In the beginning, everyone was saying grappling is the only way to go. They put strikers against the grapplers, and the grapplers were kicking the shit out of them. The Gracies were ruling that stuff. Now, granted, grappling, especially like, you know, high-level jiu-jitsu stuff, there's some complicated movements in there. But it's based off of basic grappling techniques. Just rush in and there, tie up a leg, you go. Strikers figured out how to get past that. Now they were saying you need to strike and grapple to fight. Now, when it came to the striking, so many people were telling you the same thing. Nothing fancy. And by fancy, they meant anything that had to do with anything other than a straightforward attack. So all your punches had to be straight, a few hooks here and there, all your kicks had to be straight. Maybe a round kick here and there. No spinning kicks, no side kicks, no sweeps, none of that. That's been changing, hasn't it? The reason why I personally think that in the beginning people were like, none of this other stuff works, is because they were really good with the gross motor movements in fighting. Because it's very easy to turn gross movements into straight up fighting techniques and being good at that. Being good at the basics that's what you're supposed to do. The advanced shit always takes a while. And until you can figure that out, when you try to put it out in a high-stress situation, of course it's going to fail, and then you go, this stuff's useless. Nowadays, we're seeing people pulling off some really complicated techniques in the ring. That just a few years prior, people were going, you can't do that. If you want to master fight, because the thing is, that's what the masters knew way back in the past. Their secret techniques or whatever, which really aren't all that secret, really was using some highly tuned technique that took a long time to master, because now you're trying to train your body to pull off something that it normally can't do in a really quick amount of time in a high-stress situation. You got to really fine-tune your brain and body for that. You got to really get your nervous system perfectly wired to be able to pull that out just as effectively as you could a gross motor movement. And this is part of the reason why they say mastering martial arts takes a really long freaking time. It's not because of the gross motor movements, it's because of the advanced stuff. But it's the advanced stuff that when you pull it out at the right time that make you look like a godly freaking fighter. And as the MMA is going to continue to evolve, you're going to see it get more complex. Before it was just about seeing people rolling around on the ground. Now it's not anymore. Look at all the stuff that's happening in MMA now. So more and more styles keep showing up. You see more like high-flying techniques being done, really cool stuff that people were not expecting to see just a few years ago. Because now people are having to counter the gross motor techniques. And they're finding ways to do that. And people are trying to find counters around those counters and so on. So things get more complicated. You are forced to have to get more advanced. So I hope that answers the question. How do I feel? I personally feel that in the beginning, promoting fighting styles that emphasize gross motor movements, yeah, I think that that's the way you should train in, at least in the beginning. That, especially if you want to learn how to fight real quick, that's a great way to do it. But if you're trying to master fighting, if you're one of those people that I want to be a martial artist, you're going to have to go into the advanced stuff sooner or later. Otherwise, all you're learning is just like basic stuff, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that, especially if all you're trying to do is self-defense. But to master the art of it, you gotta go into that. That's what makes it an art. The more sophisticated stuff. Okie doke. Have I seen a video on the Fujichuan White Crane Master Fighting? It's a black and white video, but obviously not too old. I may have. There are a couple of black and white videos that I've seen. The one that's coming to mind right now was like, it was this room. It's all in black and white where all these different experts and different students and masters were all showing off their techniques. I do remember one guy doing a white crane movement, but it was just one guy, and other people were doing different stuff. Like I saw some long fists in there. I saw some weapons in there. I probably, because I saw a lot of different black and white stuff, but that was a while ago. So I probably didn't see it. If you want, maybe you can like private message me or something, a link to it, and I would really be interested in checking it out. And if it's really cool, perhaps I might do a video on it. So, combining arts and music, Chinese martial arts, jiu-jitsu to create ninjas. Do I practice barehand fighting, and why? Yeah, I got into martial arts by barehand fighting at first, because even though the straight sword was the weapon I wanted to learn how to use, I couldn't learn it right away because, one, you have to be advanced, you know, at least an intermediate person or advanced in a traditional school. Your typical Kung Fu school is not going to teach you weapons on day one. It's just not going to happen. And two, there was hardly anybody I knew around me that knew this stuff. So of course I got into barehand first. I got into a little bit of long fist. There's a friend of mine named Paul, high school, taught me a little bit, but I don't really count that. And he was actually the first person who took pity on me and showed me some basic sword stuff. Then I bumped into Ishmael, who was the one who really put my shit together for 3 years straight. It was thanks to him that I like. This is what fighting is. This is what kung fu is. Like, trading around with other little martial arts in high school. I picked up a few fancy techniques here and there, a few fancy kicks, punches. I thought I was okay. Then I bumped into Ishmael. Okay, this is what fighting is. But it was all barehand. He didn't show me a single weapon. I was starting to do weapons in the background. Like, okay, I'm going to have to kind of show myself some of this stuff. But I still didn't know what I was doing until I bumped into those guys in that long fist school in New York. And then it was like, this is how you use a sword. And at first the guy didn't want to show me anything until he saw me kind of like just picking up the sword and messing around with this. You're used to that thing, aren't you? So yeah, because I kept messing with it in my backyard. I want to at least get... Okay, I'll show you a little something. But, he showed me like, okay, this is how you basically block and basically defend. But he didn't know too much because, again, he was mostly focused on the forms. But yeah, because I'm going off the topic of the question. I do practice barehand. I like barehand. There's a lot of... I personally think that if you're going to be learning to use any weapon, you kind of have to go back to the barehand. Because especially with Chinese martial arts, because Chinese martial arts derived from the weapons to begin with. Remember, the weapons were the whole point of practicing martial arts in the past. The barehanded techniques derived from weapons use. So you can like strengthen your weapons use by training in your bare hand, and your bare hand can be trained by your weapons. It's kind of symbiotic that way. The footsteps that you make, like for instance, there's a whole lot of yoke punching in long fist. There's a whole lot of this, which seems completely useless. Put a sword in your hand and suddenly it's not useless anymore, isn't it? Fencers do this. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of different motions like that where you're like, why would I do this to block? That doesn't make any... Oh, sword! Now I get it! You know what I mean? So that's why that's one of the reasons why I like doing barehand. The other reason is because it makes it easier for me to spar against people because so many people I bump into who are martial artists and never picked up a weapon. Well, shit. Yeah, all I do is practice Krav Maga. Well, that is barehand. I know long fists and some bagua. Let's go! So, yeah, the three main things that I've learned, some Wing Chun, though I don't like saying that, even though that's the one that Ishmael hardcore trained me in 3 years. I don't like saying I've known Wing Chun, however, because I don't know the forms, I just know the fists. That's how he taught me. Then long fist, and then bagua zhang. And bagua zhang is what I'm trying to focus on these days, because I just like how it moves. And now that I'm getting older, and I don't have as much time to hardcore train like I used to, I need something to focus on that is not only going to keep up my combat effectiveness, but also that I can practice in my older age. It's like, I mean, you don't see many Muay Thai guys at 50. You know what I mean? you don't really see, like, I know there are exceptions. Like Gene Bell had been, well, it was Gene Bell, right? That one guy who'd been wrestling all the way until his 60s and 70s and so on. I mean, you can do stuff like that, but generally, like the styles that are kind of rough on your body, when you get older, you kind of have to watch out for that. Bagua zhang is one of those arts that I can keep on doing and still be able to drop dudes with. So that's what I'm kind of focusing on. All right, so man, you guys asked some good questions here. With the microfracture conditioning. Ever considered trading in Shotokan? When I was younger, yeah. Nowadays, no. I'm just too much. I like the way it looks, but I just don't want to mix up my movements too much. That's just me. I like it though, but especially now that I'm older, I kind of want to stick with stuff that kind of like a similar tree of movements, so to speak. So that's why I don't really want to jump into that. Incorporate Chinese styles into their fighting, and do I think of somebody well trained enough in CMA who'd be able to hold their own in the octagon? Dum-de-dum-dum-dum. I know Kong Lei is supposed to, like, Kong Lei was a well-known Sanshu fighter in China who trained in Sanshu and traditional arts, and he later on moved into MMA and was able to kick ass with that for a little while. Now he's in movies. I don't know of any others, to be honest. That's about it. Man, oh man, oh man, I am running out of time. It's 1:45 and it's an hour 45 and it's 6:19. I really need to hurry up and get with the cooking, guys. And I'm seeing so many really good questions. I would love to get to them, and I haven't even gotten into the questions that were left under here. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna answer 2 more questions. One of them I don't mind answering because it's touching on a question that somebody asked me here, and I can kind of go into that. And another one, it wasn't asked here, but it was asked underneath my video that let people know that I was doing the QA today. Let me do that one first. Discount Viscount asked me if I can discuss the viability of using twin Dien. I think it's viable because it was used in the South. Two short Dien, mind you. Not two long ones. You generally don't see two long weapons used often. I think Skull and I talked about that. And Skull also, I think, did a video primarily just on dual weaponry. Other people have talked about dual weaponry as well. The basic answer I can give is that it is viable, though these days it's done more as a performance art, especially with women. You may have noticed, especially in contemporary wushu circles, the double Dien is primarily considered a woman's weapon. And it's usually because in order to use two long-ish weapons, it helps if they're light. And, you know, there's a lot of, like, coordinated movement that for some reason the Chinese seem to think that women are really good at coordinated two-hand movement and guys aren't. I don't know why people think that. Maybe there's something scientific to it, but I have yet to see any evidence that suggests that guys cannot use two-handed dual weapons. Especially since there are a lot of dual weapons that guys use in Chinese martial arts anyway. But, yeah, the dual Dien tends to be considered a female weapon, and it supposedly was used well. Again, these days it's mostly performance art, but considering that in the South, like you've noticed, that there are two swords put into a sheath, but they tend to be shorter ones. And, I mean, generally speaking, it would be viable. I mean, it's sort of like barehanded fighting. One hand defends and the other hand attacks, similarly. You see it done with the butterfly dough. You've seen it done with the deer antler knives. You've seen it done with a variety of dual weapons. There's no reason why it can't be done with the Dien. And I have seen it done, but with shorter ones. The longer ones are probably viable, but again, I've mostly seen it considered a woman's weapon, and it's used. I mostly see it done as performance art. But who knows? Again, sword movements are sword movements. You can probably transform into something better. Now, the next thing is conditioning. I've had a couple of people here in the chat talk about Chinese martial arts conditioning, and somebody under my other video talking about this one asked me, what is my opinion on the body conditioning methods of Shaolin and Asian martial arts? I think you got to be careful with those. There are certain methods in Chinese martial arts conditioning that can actually damage you in the long run. That's why it kind of amuses me sometimes of how these days people are like, Chinese martial arts is for longevity, when in the past, certain methods would actually shorten your lifespan. And some stuff is just effed up to do. Ever heard of taking salt and rubbing it under your skin so that the skin becomes more leathery and tougher? That don't sound healthy. I mean, yeah, it's conditioning your skin, but who knows what it's doing to your skin as well. But that was a method that was done. Iron palm training. There's a certain, like, I know Chinese people have heard of the iron palm training. There is a certain point where they kind of tell you, if you want to live longer, stop. Like, there's a certain level, like, there's certain levels you get to, like, first you condition your hands this way, and then it gets harder condition, crazier condition. And then there's a certain point where it's like, if you want to go further and make your hands even tougher, you can. But if once you reach this point, you're shortening your lifespan. You're really screwing yourself up. And like I've heard people say that you can kind of tell the people who went too far, with their eyes are kind of sunken in and stuff like that. I don't know much about that, but people have told me stories about, yeah, this guy went a little bit too far. You know, you see certain dudes with like crazy calluses, like, you know, they got freaking rocks for knuckles, and sometimes they train the wrong way, or sometimes they condition the wrong way, or sometimes they condition a little too much to the point where now they're like this in their old age because they've messed up their nerves, they've deadened the nerves. You got to be careful with that sort of stuff. That being said, like, body strengthening conditioning, I'm not against, as long as, once again, you're doing it right. Like, if you're doing stuff that's strengthening, you know, the muscles in your knees and your legs, you're doing stance training, you're doing certain types of weight training where you're, like, you know, staying stable and building up your stability, building up your muscle and arm strength, you know, resistance training, stuff like that, I don't think that's going to be a problem. You know, then you got other conditioning where they're doing things like Muay Thai guys. Like, I see this in Chinese martial arts also, but, you know, just to give you the, you know, when you're banging your shins, you know, like, so you can deaden the nerves in there. Anytime I hear something about deadening the nerves, That's what makes me go, not sure that's a good idea. You know? I mean, again, if you're trying to go for pure combat effectiveness, yeah, in the short run, you'll be powerful. And then when you get older, you're like, oh my God. I don't want that to be me. That's part of the reason why I didn't get into MMA, into Muay Thai to begin with. I don't want to be crippled at 60. Okay? I want to be able to move around with my own physical ability by 75, 80, 90 years old. My family's rather long-lived, okay? And I want to be able to reach that age and not be in a diminished condition. So there are some Chinese conditioning methods that I think are decent, but then there are other ones where you're doing stuff to your body that's having me going, I don't care how invincible it's going to make me in a fight. I don't fight 24/7. And I want to be able to, you know, when I'm doing the other stuff that's other than fighting, I want to be able to do those things without reaching for the pain pills or asking somebody else to get it for me. I don't want anybody feeding me tapioca at 92 years old. So that's that's what I got to say on that. I would go deeper into it and talk about specific methods, but I've put out this video longer than I wanted. But it was a lot of fun. I wasn't expecting 32 people to be here. I know some people, only 32. My channel is small. I got 32 people watching. That makes me happy. Thank you very much for being part of this. Let me know if you liked this way that I did it, where I started off with a topic first and then we branched out from there. I'm not getting rid of the freeform QA completely, but if you guys liked how I did this, let me know so that later on I can do more topics like this. And my QAs don't always have to be on martial arts. There's a lot of other things that I would like to do as well. Yeah, my son's acting up. But yeah, I'm hoping that you guys liked it. I know it's a bit freeform. I know it's a little scattered, but yeah, if you like the way I did this, then I'll do more of these. Possibly, maybe some of the questions you guys brought up, I could probably use as a good video as well, or for another QA. I have to get with the cooking. After that, I might. I don't know if Hononji Temple happens to be among one of the guys watching this, but dude, if you are, thank you once again for gifting me Street Fighter V, and I'm up for gaming tonight. So if you want to get on with that, or if anybody else happens to want to jump in on Street Fighter V, let me know. Just private message me through YouTube, and I'll get with you. So anyway, yeah, glad you guys showed up. Hope you guys got something out of this. And yeah, I am going to try to do a QA. Forgot to say that. I am trying to do a QA every month. I want to at least, because that's what I was supposed to do. You know, every month do one. So I will have one for next month. I will let you guys know when, with a proper amount of time this time. You know, so you guys can get set for it. It's most likely going to be Sundays. Just letting you guys know, it's most likely going to be around that 4 p.m.-ish time period on Sundays, because that's the best time for me to do them. I wish I could do it on a Saturday, because it seems that more people are receptive for it to be on a Saturday, but I work Saturday evenings. I just can't do it. Like, I'd be at work by now. Yeah, but seriously, I'd be at work right now. So there's no way I can make it work on a Saturday. And Monday and Tuesday, well, people working. So Sunday's the best time I can do it. I'm sorry, guys. But yeah, the next few, if anything changes on the scheduling, I will let you know, and it might change by the summer. I might be able to start moving to a Saturday, but for now, they're going to be on Sundays in the middle of the month. So, all right, thanks for, showing up. Glad you guys enjoyed it, and I will catch you guys later. And again, thanks for the questions. They were really good. Catch you guys later. Turn this off.